I want you to move from overwhelmed by information to confident in what really matters. I want to help you move from being unsure towards direction and purpose in your healthcare. I want to introduce you to health experts. I want to let you in on tough conversations on women's health. I want to give you a place where you can lean in and learn how to take care of yourself. Let's transform your health. Let's get clear on your goals. This is Women's Health Unplugged. I'm your host, Dr. Jordan Robertson, naturopathic doctor.
Before we begin today's episode, I want to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by the Confident Clinician Club. The Confident Clinician Club is my online education platform for naturopathic doctors and other integrative and allied health professionals who have goals of becoming not only better educated on how to be an evidence-based practitioner, but who also want to save time in their practice by being given evidence-based protocols for conditions that they see in their patients every day. The Confident Clinician Club membership opens twice per year, with our summer intake happening very soon. If you want to learn more about how to become one of my clinicians and join our group of over 240 practitioners who are learning about the standards of practice and the very best evidence-based protocols for conditions such as miscarriage, PCOS, perimenopause, and others, then I want you to download my free guide, which is about how to navigate PubMed and save you time. It's called our PubMed Hacks. You can find the link to download this free resource in the show notes of today's episode. You can also find us at theconfidentclinicianclub.com, where you'll be redirected to join our waitlist so that when our session opens for this next round of enrollment, that you get one of our coveted spots. Welcome to another episode of Women's Health Unplugged. I'm Dr. Jordan Robertson. I'm a naturopathic doctor and I am in Ontario, Canada, and it is bright and shiny early morning, and I'm recording this podcast from my cottage in the Kawarthas in Ontario, and it is a beautiful morning. The lake is glass, which is just my favorite when you can see the reflection of the shoreline and the sun and the clouds and everything like directly in the lake. It's really tempting to go for a paddleboard this morning, and maybe I will when I'm done recording this episode. It is 6:29. And the reason I'm giving you all of these details, and you can actually probably hear the birds now that I'm thinking about it, is that today we're actually talking about morning routines. And I wanted to explore this topic a little bit. I get often asked what my morning routine is. Whenever I do an Ask Me Anything on social media, people always ask what my morning routine is. And I actually feel like it's like not an interesting, or I guess I had this impression that it's not a particularly interesting thing about me, because I didn't ever really see it as a routine, because I can be pretty free spirit when it comes to some of these concepts. But when I sat down with my team and we were looking at possible episode topics, it came up again. My team was like, well, what about your morning routine? Why don't you walk people through your morning routine? Because it obviously is really successful for you. And it wasn't until I kind of sat down to look at the themes of my morning routine. So yes, I don't, there's no like hard lined routine or organization of it that's just completely counter to my personality. However, there are some themes about my morning that are important. And, the biggest one being finding things that work for you and eliminating, and this is, maybe the most important part of the conversation, is eliminating the things that are in your morning routine that are not working for you. So when I think about what the kind of purpose of my morning actually is, aside from getting coffee into my body, which we'll talk about that in a second, but the purpose of my morning is to have this, quiet, special time carved out that lets me feel really confident and calm about the day. And so the choices that I make during that time, and sometimes my morning can be 2 hours before I leave the house to go to work, even though I would not really identify as an early riser. I wake up I wake up intuitively. So I don't intuitively eat, I intuitively sleep. Um, but depending on how much time I have based on when I wake up, sometimes I can have 2 hours before I leave for work in the morning. So this long stretch of time that the things that I choose to put in it and what I choose to do, the purpose of all of that is to create calm, to create a sense of control and confidence about my day. And that's really, how I've chosen the things that go into my day. And then I've chosen to eliminate things that were not working for me, or that were not creating that feeling, right? I didn't want to sit down and do a thing or a task that left me feeling anxious or made me feel rushed or made me feel like that morning time wasn't mine. And so I want to walk through that a little bit together today. And I think that this brings up really kind of important concepts in like who owns your time. And there's a huge difference between like flailing out of bed at the last second and, rushing to, I'm saying in air quotes, like get, ready to be out in public, and doing all of those things for others, right? Like maybe doing hair, makeup, clothes, all of that, but doing it like kind of for like feeling like you're doing it for the other people that you're going to see versus feeling like it's an act of self-care or something that you're doing for you, running out of the house and then starting your day. That is not like giving you that sense of control or feeling like you own your day, right? Like that vision of that version of yourself. And I had lots of patients talk about, during the pandemic, because they didn't have the get ready part of their morning, that they would literally roll out of bed onto their computer, cameras off, and start working right away. And I don't think that sets the stage for success in the day. I'm just going to say it. I just don't think it does. And I think that those things happen to us every once in a while, right? Sometimes my intuitive sleeping means that I wake up too late. And when that happens, I usually say to my husband, like, why didn't you wake me up? And he's like, why didn't you set an alarm? And then I flail around, use some dry shampoo and fly out the door. So that still absolutely does happen, but those days don't feel as good as the other days. And so if that is happening to you, we really have to sort of take a step back and look at why. Why is that happening? Is it because, your sleep is poor and there's something maybe that needs some focus? You're not going to bed early enough, which maybe is something that's perfectly within your control. There's some things there I think that kind of need to be examined, but that version of the morning is not something that I've ever done well with. And so my goal and purpose of my morning routine is to really create kind of the exact opposite of that. So I don't set an alarm, and I do I do intuitively sleep, which I think is such a funny term. I'm going to totally use it. And part of the ability to do that is just by going to bed at a reasonable hour and knowing how much sleep I need in order to kind of wake up somewhere between like 5 and 6 every morning. My husband does set an alarm. So for sure, there are times that I'm waking up because of his alarm. But I'm often awake before his alarm. Or if I sleep through his alarm, I'm usually still waking up in a reasonable amount of time before I need to get ready and leave the house. I have to leave my house at like 7:20 in order for me to comfortably get to work, and give myself the same little mini morning routine in my desk, like at my desk. So I actually have two sort of morning routines that we're going to go through. And so I do kind of wake up naturally without the alarm. And the things that I've done to create that much time and space in the morning partly have to do with the sort of night before prep. So I always shower at night. I don't prepare my food at night, and I do know that some people benefit from that But where some of that food prep comes in is that usually when we're putting away the leftovers at dinner, I'm pretty mindful of what that's going to look like from a lunch perspective. So I may take a chicken burger and before putting it away, chop it up into little pieces. I might segregate out some of the rice or whatever it is that I'm going to take for lunch the next day so that I have a relatively smooth time in the kitchen in the morning. But I don't like legit pack my lunch. I don't know why, but I don't do that. But I do as much of the like personal care stuff in the evening as possible. I don't like showering in the morning. I would, I'm happier sort of doing the like prep and hair stuff and all of that when my hair is dry in the morning. So I give myself as much space as possible in the morning so that I don't have to do some of those things. And I wake up naturally. And the first thing that I do is sit and have this sort of like quiet cup of coffee. As if you follow me on social media, you know that like a third of the memes that I post are related to coffee. And for how much I love coffee and for how much I love joking about coffee, my daily consumption is actually very average. There have been lots of moments in my life where it has been higher, and we'll talk about that in a second. But that is like literally the first thing that I do. I don't do the lemon water. I don't do any, I literally, the very first thing I do is have a cup of coffee. And the ritual of that coffee is now outweighs the importance of the caffeine. I'm not going to say that the caffeine is not important. The caffeine is incredibly important, but the ritual of it is very important. So I actually only have one cup of coffee during this entire home version of the morning routine. And the second cup is when I sit down at my office. But that morning cup of coffee is done quietly. And the purpose of that time is really to just sit and feel like I've got a grip on the day. And often I sit for like 45 minutes to an hour and drink this cup of coffee and do some of these sort of confidence building tasks that I do to help me get ready for the day. Now, as a side note, there's absolutely been times in my life where my love affair with coffee has gone completely sideways and I drink way too much of it. I specifically have had windows of time where my coffee consumption was so high that if I even was a little bit below that, and I specifically remember trying to come down off of my coffee at one point and literally like gagging in the bathroom in between patient appointments because the detoxification from the lack of caffeine was so significant that my whole body felt sick. I don't like to live in that space. And usually when my coffee consumption is that high, my anxiety is not worth it's not worth the temporary energy or the mental clarity moves to the point of me trying to like see through time. And in doing that, I just create a whole lot of horrific possibilities with my anxiety. So I like to keep my coffee at maybe I have 2 caffeinated cups per day total and perhaps a third half calf in the afternoon. But usually that's if I have to work past 6 p.m., which is rare. So I have that first cup of coffee and I sit with my husband during that time. And I like that time to connect. My brain turns on way faster than his. He sits and he is also doing the same thing with his cup of coffee, which is, having a very special moment and relationship with it. And my brain turns on like immediately while he sits there quietly and then listens to all of my ideas for like half an hour. But I do like that time together. It feels like, and if you have kids, you know that like actual like one-to-one connection time with your partner can be pretty few and far between. We've always had that, special half an hour, 45 minutes, hour in the morning where it is like high priority that we just sit there. And sometimes we literally just sit there and we're both on our computers and doing our own thing. Sometimes I force him to come, sit with me in the hot tub, even if he doesn't want to. Or I follow him around with my cup of coffee and then just sit near him. We've always sort of had this like time where we, sit and have the cup of coffee together. When we found our house, which is now our kind of forever house, literally the thing that sold us on the house was the fact that there was a little balcony off of our off of our bedroom that we can sit and have a cup of coffee on. And that was the literal conversation of like, well, has to be the house that we live in forever because look, we can have our cup of coffee on this little balcony. So that time is actually really special. And it has saved us probably 1,000 deaths of figuring out who does what for the kids today. What are our pain points for the day? And that is how I spend that time. And when I say building confidence in the day, it's not because I feel like I'm a total boss. It's because we're sitting there, and when I chat with Sean, my husband, about it, we're usually trying to figure out if there's anything that's a bit of a pain point that we've kind of missed, or maybe someone's needs have shifted during the week that we need to be able to adjust to. So for example, we may get to Thursday and he's realized that exercise needs to be a priority for him. And we hadn't really organized that earlier in the week. And then during that coffee time, he will say, I need to do something tonight. So is that okay? Because we don't ask for permission, but can we create some space for that so that I can go and do my exercise or training tonight? That's what we kind of spend that time for. We, maybe quick conversation about what the kids' lunches need to look like. What time do I get home from work? He works from home. What does my day look like? What time do I get home from work? Do I need to run an errand on my way home? Do we have any pain points about making it to the weekend from a shopping perspective, etc.? That's what we do in that time, is chat about, well, I chat about all of my 10-year goals during that time while his brain is still slowly turning on. But then we also make sure that the day is going to be great, right? We make sure that we're on the same page, that everything feels good, that any little potential hiccup has been foreseen. And then, but if it hasn't, right, it's not like we're micro planning or micromanaging our day. That's not actually how we work at all. But it is just making sure that we're on the same page. Or do we understand what the kids' screen time has looked like this week? Do we, have any calls during the day, if one of us is working from home, that we need quiet? Is there anything that we need support with that the other person totally needs to be on board for, whether it's their goal or not? And I've talked in other episodes about goal setting, and we've got one coming up about goal setting and leveraging your partner. But it's very common that people quietly set a goal in their head and then never tell anybody about it. And that just literally doesn't work when you're in a dynamic of a family system that actually you would require support from all of those people in order to achieve your goal. You can't just quietly say, I'm going to do a couch to 5K and I'm not going to tell anybody in my family, because you need them to be able to shift and move what's going on in their lives for you to create space for you to exercise. And then when that doesn't happen because you haven't told them, and then you don't accomplish your goal, right? We sit in the resentment of our family for not giving us the time and space to exercise. And then we also feel really terrible about ourselves. And so instead, we use that time to, ask for the space and time and support and what we need so that we can actually meet all of our individual goals. It's super important. But we also have literally just done it for 20 years, this morning routine of sitting and drinking a cup of coffee while I talk a lot and Sean sits there quietly and says, you're talking a lot. That's how it goes. But that understanding of your day, and that's kind of my next point, is probably the most important thing that I do from a time management perspective. I get asked often, especially by my colleagues, how I manage my time. And part of it is hidden in these simple steps that get done every day, but also I do this sort of same, I'm going to call it an activity, at the beginning of my week as well, to sit down and look at the landscape of the day or the landscape of the week or the landscape of the month to figure out what is coming, to figure out where my pain points are. What more can I tolerate on my list, right? What more can I take on in my day? Because sometimes when I look at a day and I'm like, look, this is 90% full and has no room for error. And then I get an email asking for more. or a staff comes to me and says, can we talk about this? I know from the beginning of my day that my tolerance, and I don't mean like emotional tolerance, I just mean my capacity and my tolerance for taking on more is actually kind of low because I saw it coming, right? I saw this day is 90% of my capacity. Actually, that email needs to be responded to tomorrow. Actually, can we shelve your issue or that situation until tomorrow? Right. But I can see those things coming, and it actually allows me to accept more things into my space if I can, or to say no to those things if I can't take them on. Or at least we can have a dynamic conversation, especially with the staff of like, well, how urgent is this? Is this a thing that must be solved right away, et cetera, et cetera? And if it's an emergency, sure. But I do think that we often passively accept more things into our day and space than we intend to, because we maybe haven't really thought about our own personal capacity for the day with respect to the things that are already on our plate, right? Like if you thought about your budget, you've got your fixed expenses and then you've got your fun stuff or other stuff. There are things in my day that are these fixed uses of my time and my energy and my emotion and my bandwidth. And then there's the rest of the day. And I like to feel in control of choosing what else comes in rather than feeling like things get piled on top of me instead. But sitting down and having that morning moment to myself where I can be like, what do I have today? Like, what is my tolerance for my day shifting a bit? What's my tolerance for taking on more? Do I have the possibility of adding to this day? Or now that I'm looking at it, is there anything that needs to be subtracted from my day? Can I delegate away some of the things that are there? Are any of these things a recurring problem that I need to review? Do we need to create some standard operating procedures for how these things are actually being done? Because actually turns out I felt this way last Thursday too, right? And so, but it's that reflective process that I think sometimes we're missing. And it may seem simple or silly or whatever you want to call it to do this kind of every day. But the way that leaves me feeling to be able to look at the day and be like, yep, I have an hour here that is kind of unaccounted for. However, I'm not putting anything in there, right? Because of how I can see the rest of the day unfolding. Or the opposite of, hey, I got an hour in here and I'm feeling really good this week. I'm going to throw this in there and I'm going to get more done than I had planned originally. So that's how I do that. And I sort of mentally prepare for the uncertainty that might come with the day as well, by looking at my day in that way. And I actually do this at the beginning of every week as well. And it's part of my sort of delegation and dependent task process that I sort of work through. So sitting where I sit in my company, there are a lot of tasks that are dependent on me doing stuff, right? And you probably or may feel that way in a bunch of your work and maybe even in your family dynamic, that there are, the buck stops with you on this particular job or task and no one can move forward unless you do it, right? There are things like that in my life. Or there are things that I hold the keys or know the answer for what that task looks like when it's completed, but I actually need support in order to complete it. I spend that morning delegating that morning routine. And when I'm looking at my day, figuring out how I need to leverage the people in my life or the people on my team in order to help me accomplish my goals. So it might be a quick email, print these pages for me. I need to sign them and scan them and send them back. Or sending something to Sean to be like, can you sign the kids up for this camp? I just got this email. Or, it's, emailing someone on my team to say, I have, these ideas or these pain points that we need to go through. Can we add it to our agenda for next week's meeting? Right? It's those kinds of things that I do in the morning in order to use the people on my team's skills in a way that helps me get things done, because I can proofread something for like 3 hours and still have a spelling mistake on it. Whereas I have a team member that would beautifully be able to manage that task and get it back to me And so I spend that morning figuring out, actually do it on Sunday and Monday as well for the whole week. But in that morning day, I also think about, is there anything on that particular day that needs to move into someone else's space or off my plate in order for it to come back to me by the end of the day or by the end of the week for it to be completed. Now, in my work, we actually use project management software in order to do this, right? Where we can assign each other tasks, we can create dependent and codependent tasks with subtasks, etc. Meaning that, like, when someone checks a box, it sends me an email to say, okay, Jordan, so-and-so did their thing. It's your turn. But I do think that even before we moved to software-based, because now a lot of us work remotely or off-site, and so we've needed to move to a technological solution. Before that, we had the same systems in place. We just saw each other in person, or the people I worked with, I had face-to-face connection with every day. And so we had those same systems and sort of checks and balances in place to make sure that the number of things that were on my plate were a reasonable number. And that I spent every, Sunday night or Monday morning figuring out how to support everyone else in their work and how to get those things off of my plate so that they came back to me with lots of time before they were due. I'm saying due in air quotes because we're adults. Things are due, but they're not really due at the same time. But I spend that morning time, I'm getting a little bit away from my morning routine and talking about my week routine a little bit, but I spend that time in the morning figuring out if on that day, if there are things that need to be done that I need support with or that someone else needs to be a part of, and making sure that that person has those resources that they need to do it and that I've been really clear about what it is that I need from them. And I do spend that morning figuring that out. That have saved me 1,000 deaths at work and in my life because it means that I've become really proficient at asking for support. Because if you literally create the time and space in the morning to figure out who you need to help you in order to be successful in your day and then communicate with that person, you will be more successful in your day. Even if the example in your life is just communicating with your kid, right? And saying to your kids, which I have to say often, look, I have a call from 12 to 1, and that is not a time that I can be interrupted. What do you need from me in order for us to make that happen? Do we need to make your lunch now? Do you need me to defrost these hot dogs? Do we need, right? Like whatever that version of that is in your life versus it coming to 12 o'clock and then my kids are asking for food because turns out they're hungry, but I'm trying to work. We have the similar versions of that in our work as well. And sometimes we really just haven't taken that moment or time to sit back and think about what we actually need to be successful and then asking for it and then receiving that help. And I do spend part of my morning figuring out what that needs to look like day to day. But I also really do kind of a big overhaul of what my week needs to look like on Sunday night or Monday morning so that I can just like disseminate all of those things to all of the people on my team that I need support with early in the week. And then I get them back by Friday afternoon kind of thing. The other thing that I do in my morning routine is do some journaling and gratitude work. And, the order of me talking about, delegating tasks and then journaling, the order between those two things is pretty fluid. And part of that's because I've always been a strike when the iron's hot kind of worker. I have a really hard time forcing myself to do anything. And whenever I say that, people are like, but you're so productive and it's only because I work when I feel like working and I work really hard when I feel like working. And when I don't feel like working, I don't. And I feel like that's, probably served me. I'm sure there's moments where maybe it hasn't served me, but I despise reading the same sentence over and over or procrastinating and then surfing through all my tabs while I'm supposed to be doing something. I would literally rather just put the work away and create deadline pressure by having it shifted and moved to a different time slot where I might actually be more productive. I just can't do that. So if I sit down and open my planner and I don't have anything really on the go and my day looks pretty light, and I'll do my gratitude journaling first. right? And then I will use that to create, some ideas about what I want my day to look like, etc. And then maybe move to the delegation, day planning type part of the morning. But sometimes when I sit down, I feel like my day is overwhelming. And I think this is where we can really easily shelve a habit like gratitude work. Because when I sit down, if I open my planner and I'm like, oh my God, this day is going to mow me over. I need to figure out how we're going to manage this. That's when we let those other habits like gratitude go by the wayside, right? Because it's like, I got to dig in to my work right now. I let myself dig in to the work right now, but I finish with the gratitude. And so this is when I say, like, I don't have a routine, but I do, because the components of the routine are always there. I just don't do it in the same order every day. And if I skip a day, it's not, it's fine. I just restart the next day. And sometimes when we talk about things like routines, or when I, even see online about, the CEO routine, or, the magic morning routine, it's like at 6:05, I get on my pillow and I meditate until 6:11. Like, that's just not how my routine goes. But my acceptance of the fluidity of it, but my commitment to the components of it, I think is probably where my personal success had lied. But that's also my personality. Anyway, so the gratitude part of the day or of the morning happens either way. Sometimes it happens at the morning, the very first thing as I'm sipping my coffee. Sometimes it happens because I'm up before Sean, and so he can't listen to all my ideas. And so I might as well just write them down. Sometimes it happens at the very end before, and I'm like kind of rushing because now I've sat for too long, which is pretty much what happens every day. But I try and work it in every day without missing too many days in a row. I started with my gratitude practice after taking a mindset course where I just had to write down 3 things I was grateful for every day. And it was kind of the purpose of it was to do it come hell or high water. And sometimes that meant during times when I was struggling or when I had a particularly PMS-y morning that I would write down like, I'm grateful for my coffee. I'm grateful for this mug. I'm grateful for this sweater that I've been wearing every single day since COVID. These were the kinds of things that I wrote down because they were accessible. They were things I could see or feel or taste. But really, if you think about it, those are pretty surface level things, right? They're not particularly enlightened things that I was grateful for. However, the research on gratitude practice suggests that even spending the time to think about how grateful I am for this sweater, even though it should probably be burned at this point, that you are flexing, certain parts of your brain that actually do create better mood and do create more calm, even if the thing that you're being grateful for is kind of silly. And so the practice of doing it is important, even if you're having a hard time, or even if you think I have nothing to be grateful for. Okay, fine. I'm grateful for this carpet and the color of it, or I'm grateful for this bird, even though he woke me up, right? It's the practice. And so I started with that after doing a mindset course, maybe about 6 or 8 months ago is where I really kind of dialed in and started doing a more dedicated gratitude practice. And then I spent some time looking at some of the work on burnout. I read the book Burnout, which I highly recommend, by the Nardolsky sisters, if I'm pronouncing their last name right, Emily and her sister. And they talk about the gratitude practice as well, and talk a little bit about some of the research behind it and how we can further that gratitude practice if we take it one step further. So rather than just saying, I'm grateful for this sweater, you want to connect your gratitude statement with your inner strength and your community. And so either, you're going to say something like, I'm grateful for this sweater because I bought it at my favorite clothing store in the community that I work in. And I love how close-knit my, community business association is. Right? So now I'm not just grateful for the sweater. I've actually expanded the thought to think about the how and why and how this sweater kind of came to be. You also can be grateful for your inner strength and skills that helped you achieve that thing that you're grateful for. So again, you're not just grateful for the sweater. I'm grateful for, you know, the strength and resiliency that I've shown this year during COVID. And every morning that I get up and put this sweater on and start the day, I'm reminding myself that I'm going to keep going no matter what. So, obviously, those two statements, the one about the community and the one about my inner strength and resilience, is slightly more, I'm going to go back to my term, enlightened than just being grateful for this silly sweater that I wear every morning because I'm looking at it and I've got nothing to be grateful for. And so that practice of like sort of flexing the muscle and flexing it just a little bit more than you had originally intended is probably where we deepen that practice and get more out of it. So I have a spot in my planner that I write gratitude in every day. I'm actually just about to try a new planner. I'll let you know how that goes. That has dedicated space for gratitude work every day as well. And the practice of doing that, I feel like, has made a kind of a tremendous difference because it really sets the stage for that morning and that day. And even if I'm rushing, right? Even if the morning is chaotic, even if I'm parenting alone because my partner's away, writing down, like, I'm grateful that I had a minute to write this gratitude statement before I start the mom decathlon and I'm completely overwhelmed by everything that is about to happen to me. It's creating some levity, like in that moment, to be able to be like, okay, look, like today is not the worst, right? Like you can handle whatever is coming your way, even if it's maybe not exactly the way you wanted the day to be. You're creating an intention for that day, and that is a very powerful experience. So I write 3 things minimum that I'm grateful for, and I do try and evolve the statements about what I'm grateful for based on what I learned in the book Burnout, and the evidence and things that I know about things like self-compassion and other signs of like inner strength and resiliency, which the research shows that women have less hormonal symptoms if we can engage in higher self-compassion. And so I do sort of have a dedicated practice for that to make sure that I am actually taking care of myself in sort of that bigger way. So that's the sitting portion of my morning routine. So it includes me talking Sean's ear off about all my ideas. It involves the quiet cup of coffee. I'm saying in air quotes, my coffee feels quiet. I don't think his coffee feels particularly quiet. The rapid fire, can I get anything off my to-do list? Sometimes I'll send all my emails in the morning because I know I probably won't have a chance to look at it again for the rest of the day. My work is still work that is done without email. And so I accumulate like 50 emails by the end of every day, but it's not actually part of like my work in order to do emails. And so I actually find that whole situation relatively difficult. I delegate away the things that I need to other people, and then I have the time for gratitude. The rest of my morning routine looks like me getting myself ready, like personal care wise, getting ready, and then making my lunch and then heading to the office for the office portion of my morning routine. Because I've showered at night, I have a relatively easy and simple time doing the beauty portion of my morning. My hair, blow dried the night before makes it really easy for me to get ready. I have a very simple makeup morning routine and whatnot. I'm not particularly high maintenance in that regard. And I really like clothes. And so I have lots of options. I really like clothes. And so to me, that portion of the day is actually really enjoyable because I've also made sure that I have enough time and space to do it. And then I make my lunch. And I've talked about breakfast eating and lunch making and all of that kind of stuff on the podcast before. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about what it is, but the routine of it is important. And so I can make my breakfast and my lunch in less than 10 minutes. and neither of them are eaten at home. I pack up the whole thing and I actually eat my breakfast at my desk every day. And the reason for that was because I was just leaving the house too early. So I leave at like 7:20. And if I ate my breakfast at 7, I was starving at like 9, just as I was about to start my day. And so I actually take everything with me in the morning and eat my breakfast at my desk at like 10 after 8. And so my breakfast and my lunch both get made. And the routine of making those things, and so I eat almost the same breakfast every day, but I don't eat the same lunch every day. So it's not a routine putting things in the containers and whatnot, but there's a routine to it, meaning that there's lots of food in the fridge. There is cut up protein, usually from the night before. There are options. There is fruit. There is protein powder. The infrastructure is there. There is Tupperware. All the things that I need to successfully, sort of dance through my kitchen and make my breakfast and lunch are all available to me. And I would say if you're clumsy in your kitchen in the morning, and I always think clumsy is the best word to describe people making their lunch when they don't do it often or they don't have the tools around them, right? It's clumsy. If you're clumsy moving through your kitchen, making your breakfast, there's one of two things. One is either you're not doing it often enough, and so you need to clumsily do it every single day for like 3 or 4 weeks, and you'll get faster and you'll get better, but you won't magically get better by buying your lunch for a few days in a row and then trying to come back to the kitchen. You'll still be clumsy. Or you don't have the right infrastructure, meaning you need to buy some containers for your lunches. You need to buy some water bottles or mason jars or something for your smoothies. Just give yourself some freedom in that routine by getting yourself the things that you need in order for it to actually be successful. So I make those things. I make all of that stuff, my breakfast and my lunch, and I take it with me. And so I leave the house every day. And when the gyms were open, I left my house every single day with 3 bags. My work bag, which has my laptop and my planner, my lunch bag, which had my breakfast and my lunch and snacks, and my gym bag. And I left the house every single day with those 3 bags. And it wasn't that I was always necessarily going to the gym, but I always took my bag just in case. I never knew what my day was going to look like. And I live really far from my gym and my work. And I never wanted to be at work and realize that I could have gone to the gym and I didn't have my stuff. So I took them every day. And it actually, when the pandemic hit, I took my gym bag to work accidentally multiple times. Multiple times, really, like, there's nothing sadder than that, actually, that I would get out to my car and realize I had my gym bag with me. And I'd be like, God damn, like, I just want to go to the gym. Or I'd realize in like a couple days later that my gym bag was like sitting beside me on the passenger seat. And I'd be like, man, like, it's such an ingrained routine and I don't have my stuff, or I have my stuff and I can't go. So that's me. And I leave the house with all of those things. Now, when I arrive at work, I have a work morning routine as well. And so I get to work. The goal is 30 minutes or more before my actual first appointment of the day. And so you can see the overall theme of my morning routine is no rushing. That is like the overall theme is I do not rush. I am not a good person when I rush. I forget stuff when I rush. And so really when I think about what the overall theme is of having this routine is that I don't want to rush. So I get to work usually around 10 to 8 or so. It's about a 30-minute drive for me. And I don't start work until 8:30. And so my first appointment is at 8:30. And so in that 30-ish minutes is when I have my second cup of coffee. It's when I look at my other to-do lists and emails and work. I look at the to-do list that's been tasked to me by my team, which is on a piece of paper sitting on my desk every morning, because I still roll with paper to-do lists. Even though we have this really nice software, I still like a paper to-do list. And I work really hard at finishing every single thing that's been tasked to me in that first 20 to 30 minutes so that I can task it back to everybody else. And so it's that time that I move through all of the results of all the lab work that's come in the last 24 hours. That's the time when I will answer quick patient questions if someone's asked a question through the staff and I just need to relay an answer back. If I have scheduling pain points, if the staff has said, can you look at X date? Can you start 15 minutes early? Do you have some wiggle room for this person? I'm doing all of that before I start for the day. And the reason is because I start working at 8:30 and my staff starts working at 9. And I like to take that piece of paper and have it be completed and put it back on their desk so that when they arrive at 9 o'clock, they can actually move through all of those things so we can care for all of those people that are waiting for responses and nothing falls through the cracks because we've got multiple people looking at every bullet multiple times in a day. And knowing that's our routine kind of every day, like I said, the sort of overall themes is that I don't like to rush. And so I've built in or created a lot of space for myself. So if I get to work and I'm 20 minutes early, right? I know it's like 20 minutes early, meaning that I'm actually 10 minutes late. I know that we've got some buffer built in for how and when all those tasks that have been assigned to me get done. If I sleep in until 20 after 6 and still instead of getting up at 5:45, I just shorten the length of time that I do some of those sitting and talking and gratitude and delegating. And, I always do my hair no matter how late I wake up, but I have the ability or flexibility to shorten some of the things that I like to do in my morning routine. And I'm still not running around like a chicken with my head cut off, running to work late. And so those are the kind of the two big themes, like no rushing, creating space. I like looking at the landscape of my day or week, depending on what day of the week it is, and asking for help, accepting help, delegating tasks as much as possible. And when I delegate, and we're going to do another episode on delegation, because I think this is quite an important task. When I delegate, I then stop caring at that particular moment how the outcome turns out. So if I say to my husband, can you make something for dinner? And, why don't you make a pasta for dinner? Full stop. At the end of that sentence, and he says, yes, yeah, I'll make pasta for the kids for dinner. After that moment, I literally stop caring about how that pasta turns out. I don't care what gets put in it. I don't care how good it tastes. I don't care what time they eat it. I don't care if they use the spiral noodles that I was planning on using later in the week, because you can't, right? Like good delegation actually means that you pass the task on to someone else and you stop caring about how the outcome turns out. Or if you do care, you need to be way more specific in your delegation, right? I needed to say, hey, Sean, can you make pasta and don't use those spiral noodles because I have a plan for those later in the week? But instead, I just said, can you make a pasta? And so when I delegate work away, I stop caring about how the person achieves the outcome, right? They could do it, standing on their head. They could do it at a coffee shop. They could do it in many ways. He could put chicken in the pasta. He could put shrimp in the pasta. It literally doesn't matter. It's when we hold on to all of those pieces of the thing that we've delegated that we really haven't delegated at all. And so if you feel like you're a delegator and yet you still feel overwhelmed by the stuff that's on your plate, you have to really look at whether or not you're truly delegating and emotionally delegating things away too. Or are you still holding on to some kind of piece of it that you're controlling in some way? So I delegate all of my tasks, get things off of my to-do list, but I also really slow down and think about the purpose of that day and what I want that day to look like for me, not just from a productivity perspective, but from an emotional perspective. And sometimes I can stare down a day and be like, this is going to be a tough one. But I do think, and when I think back to some of my own resiliency training, so much of that comes from my exercise. and from my training, because sometimes an exercise or training session is really short, right? Or you have to be really strong for a really short period of time. And sometimes it's like a marathon on paper and you're like, oh my God, I got to do this. And then I got to do this for 4 rounds. That training or that resiliency training, that is really what exercise does most for our mental health, is creating the toughness that you can actually persevere through difficult things. I want to know kind of at the beginning of the day emotionally what it's going to take for me to be at my best for the day. And so when those things happen or when uncertainty happens, I've actually already decided how I want to show up in my day. And I'm going to choose that version of myself rather than letting my day steamroll me over. And that's really been the secret to my morning routine success, is deciding how I want that day to go, and then including tasks that actually help me get there. So the last thing I'll finish with is, the things that are not in my morning routine, or that I try not to have in my morning routine, or that have temporarily had to exit my morning routine because they weren't really serving me. So at the beginning of the episode, I talked about how you actually need to think pretty hard about whether or not the things that you're doing are serving you. And sometimes the things that are in our routine are not serving us, but it would feel very painful to get rid of them. Or they're not serving us, but they're not serving us. And so we leave them there when really that's just kind of time wasted, right? I think about social media. So some of the things that I've had to get rid of over time. One was I had to get rid of my second coffee because at my house, because I felt like my brain was going to explode while I was driving to work. I was never calm. I was anxious. I hadn't eaten yet, right? Because I eat at my desk. And then my work coffee was becoming a third coffee and not a second coffee. And that was really just not a good thing for me. So I had to get rid of my second coffee at home. I've worked hard to get rid of social media in the morning. And it's not because it's negative for me. It's not paralyzing. However, it's also not particularly productive. I can't tell you who I heard this quote from, but I really enjoy the concept of creating before you consume, right? So that idea of I'm going to decide what I want my day to look like. I'm going to decide what needs to get done today. I'm going to think about what my big purpose in this world is. Maybe I write a few captions for social media posts that I want to do before I look at what everyone else is doing, right? Don't let your Instagram feed decide how your day is going to go. You decide first. And then once you've decided, then look at your Instagram feed. So that's something that's kind of come and gone from my time. I do know if I put my phone away in the morning, then I'm actually a lot more productive. I get way more actual work done if my phone is not in my space. And then I also have had moments where I've had to not look at things like banking every day. That definitely was important at the beginning of the pandemic. The pandemic was definitely had an impact on my work, on my husband's work, on our families, sort of economic safety, all of those things that many families moved through, either at the beginning or continue to move through with the pandemic because of loss of work. And there were times when, it was very in my routine to look at things like banking and, business expenses and that kind of stuff on a daily. And then there were moments where that actually was being harmful to look at every day and more paralyzing than productive. And so I actually removed it out of my morning routine and then started to just check in on those things once a week instead. So that doesn't mean that those things have always stayed that way, right? There are mornings where I have a second coffee at home, or there are stretches where I do look at banking every single day, or there is time when I'm unproductive. But it's that circling back to the purpose of the morning routine as often as possible and making sure that everything is just always serving and that it's not just there, right? I want to live with more intent than that. I don't want things to just take up space in my day. I want them to feel productive, feel like they're moving me forward, and that they're actually really serving me. And that's my morning routine.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of Women's Health Unplugged. My goal is to help you feel more confident about your health. Please remember that what we talked about today in the podcast does not constitute medical advice. nor was a doctor-patient relationship formed. If you have questions about your healthcare or about how today's topic pertains to you, please take it up with your family doctor, your specialist, or someone on your health team.